Sorry, folks. We just had a slight drop in video. We're fixing it right now. Reconnecting to Chapelmon, who should be with us in a few moments. What the? Should be with us in a few moments. Just we're sending an invite back. Oh, no, that's not what I wanted. I guess that is what I wanted. So sorry about that, folks. We'll be getting back into it in a few moments. We were talking about what we were talking about. So that's my face, and as soon as Chapelmon joins us, he'll be with two faces. So that just happened. It's So hopefully he'll be joining us in a moment. Yeah, so we were talking about Super Bunny Hop's thing, and I'm gonna have to check my internet connection because it's been very lousy of those dates. It doesn't drop; it just drops and then starts up again, drops again. So um, there we are.
Hey.
Sorry about that. It's my internet connection has been past a couple of days. Just like does a sudden drop and then it picks up again.
Oh,
It doesn't degrade. It's just sort of drops and it's been
so
affecting
we're
my
back.
streaming. Yeah, so we're back. And also
All
meant that
right.
it also meant that Zoom was also being a pain in the butt. So we were talking about taxes and video game companies. Moving on to another multi-billion-dollar company that may be doing something with their
Sorry.
IP.
Hey,
Uh,
hang on one moment.
yeah. Lucasfilm is contemplating a Knights of the Old Republic movie. This is just, at this moment, it is just rumors, right? It came out of Star Wars Celebration this past weekend. But it's interesting that they're taking a look at it. If something comes out of it, I would love to see it. I don't know who's going to write it, and hopefully they'll go for KOTOR and not KOTOR 2. Here's the link to that. But that's just one piece of news that came out of Star Wars Celebration. The one thing most people were interested in was the fact that a teaser trailer for their new Star Wars game, came out. But the thing that people were it's called Jedi Fallen Order, which has been something that people have been talking about for a while. The promise, that the Jedi Fallen Order won't have any microtransactions or anything of those egregious things people hate. It's not an open world game. It's a single player with no multiplayer, no DLC, and no microtransactions, according to Blair Brown about Jedi Fallen Order.
Yes.
And there's another piece of news that I don't like. Writer Chris Avellone worked on Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order story, which can, according to PC Gamer, can only be a good thing. Well, he's one of the people who worked on the story. That's fine. If he's the main writer, then no. Last time he worked in a Star Wars story, he didn't do so well. I mean, no. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. So what do you think? You believe him?
About them having keeping microtransactions. So the thing is, well, first off, I think it's kind of rather bold and on the nose for them to be like, "Hey, look, we're not going to do aggressive monetization in the game." Is that great? Aren't we great for doing that? Like, no. It's like you should be doing that for every game.
Or at least many a game.
Yeah, this shouldn't be the exception. This should be the rule. It just you buy the game once and that's it. Like
Hey,
Great.
hey,
So
kids, we're cool again by not screwing you in the bud without warning you first. Ain't we
yeah.
nice? Aren't we
Yes.
cute? Aw.
So two things that they kind of didn't leave out, that'd be pre-order bonuses, which, those really aggressive, really annoying pre-order bonuses. And then I guess you could also include special edition, shenanigans and stuff with that. And two, this isn't a guarantee that the story is going to be long and fulfilling, and you know they aren't just going to end up cutting stuff out and reselling it to us as DLC, as macro transactions, I guess you would call it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and of course, this isn't the first time where a big name studio has said we're not going to have microtransaction in this game, and then later they added microtransactions to the game. The Division is a big example of that.
Fallout 76.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, they
Bethesda.
said they've been kind of like kind of skirting around the not having any, I guess, just non-cosmetic microtransactions. Are kind of pushing that line a little now when it comes to Fallout 76.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, in a way, it's one of those that I want to believe them, but I know better than to actually believe it. I think we'll see, and we'll say that they were honest when it's 5 years later, the game is out, the game's been out, and they haven't
Mm.
added microtransactions into it.
Well, I guess most of the rumors were right. 2020 is going to be the year of the new PlayStation 5, and it's also going to be the year of the discless Xbox One X,
Hmm.
which is already out or will be out this later on this year. Um, let's start with the Xbox One X. The idea it's going to be again, as it was rumored for a couple of months now, it's literally the Xbox One X without the disc. That's it. They showed it in Inside Gaming. They opened up the box and it was like, because it's the same form factor. It's like there's a SATA SATA connector for the disc. It's empty. They just literally took it out and sold the box with it out, which makes perfect sense. Just
Yeah.
it's cost saving stuff. So why not do it? Right? Um, I'm thinking, it kind of reminds me of the Valve, the Valve box, the Steam
The
box,
same.
right? In a way, it's like, oh, this is just a way of getting people into the ecosystem of Xbox Live, right? And it's something that Microsoft has been working on for a very long time. So, sure, as an option, I got no problem with it.
Hmm. But yeah, so I guess the biggest thing with I haven't like checked out any of the Xbox stuff, but the PlayStation 5, the big reveal, which is hmm, I mean, as a mostly like Sony user, it's like, okay. I wasn't all that excited for the PlayStation 4 when it came back when it came out. It's like, well,
Mm-hmm.
I'll just wait for like one, a second iteration with like I did with the PlayStation Pro. And I guess the thing that makes me happy is backwards compatibility between PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5. So that's great. I'm going to be especially happy if it's not just limited to having physical games, but any of your digital stuff as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like that better be a thing. And it's also great to hear that they're still supporting like their VR stuff for anybody who's bought the VR things.
Yeah.
As someone who's probably will eventually like probably end up getting a headset at some point and like playing at least one or two VR games at hopefully at some point.
Yeah, some of the features that the game that this new PlayStation is supposed to have is 8K resolution, when most people are not even playing at 4K. But there you go, pushing
Yeah,
the envelope
I
there.
I
Uh,
barely got a 4K television a
yeah,
couple of months ago.
and SSD hard drive, which is great if for speeding up usually the slow load times in consoles. But the thing about SSDs is that they tend to have a much lower lifetime than regular hard drives. Not so much that they're completely useless, but for particularly something that is heavily reliant on downloads, right?
Hmm.
Um, and storing stuff in your hard drive and erasing them and getting a new game and all that to make space. Yeah, this is. You might see complaints within a year or two. People like, oh, I have to buy a new hard drive. Blah blah. It's going to be proprietary hard drive. Is how it's going to cost. Which is something that happened with the 360, but a lot with the hard drives that it had. It's like, oh, you can expand a hard drive, but it's for what they gave you was pretty expensive. So most people ended up just buying the newer version of the Xbox with the bigger hard drive, right? So yeah, none of this stuff is new. Um, I think I think what it would depend on it's a timing in 2020 and how the economics of the year 2020 are shaking up. If we end up in another recession, that certainly will hurt it in a way, and also the marketing, right? Because that was really what hurt the Xbox One when it came out, the marketing, and the whole
Yeah.
digital sharing. But we gonna give you digital sharing, yay! That means you can't share physically. So
Yeah, and
yeah.
then of course the whole it has to be online all the time. I have like a 24-hour check-in thing, and then the whole Angry Joe interview with like, oh, it's not just a switch we can just flip on and off, like the whole DRM thing, and that's exactly what they ended up doing is just flipping it on and off.
Yeah.
Oh, the best line was that like, hey, if you don't want, for people that don't live in places where they have good internet infrastructure and don't have a lot of money, we have another option for you. It's called the Xbox 360. You could just play stick with the last generation consoles. Like, oh, that is a bad thing to tell people.
We just had a problem with my internet that it just dropped, even momentarily. So, and we're just streaming. So, yeah, a great example there. And last week we had another problem as well. So, uh, you know, it happens, right? And of course, with Stadia coming out as well, and it, we'll see. I think 2020 will be a very interesting year for consoles. I will not predict whether it's make or break, but certainly we're gonna see some people. We're gonna some. I want to see. It's gonna be like between 1999 and 2000, where people are like, "Hey, the new Dreamcast is coming. It's gonna be the best thing ever." And then it was like, Dreamcast, Sega making consoles. What? 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 No, we're not. We're not doing that. No. Nope. Nah. Okay. Never mind. So hopefully it doesn't get that bad, but 2020 is going to be a year to watch, certainly. In other news, well, many people heard, of course, that there was a fire in this week, Notre Dame, earlier this week. I believe it was on Monday during Monday during the day and afternoon in Paris, and it suffered significant damage. A lot of people have pledged a lot of money to it, which has brought some memes out there in reaction, of course. But one of the companies that has pledged a significant amount of money, sorry, is being Ubisoft, which is a French-based company. And not only they offered, they will be donating according to their own press release, and I'm going to put it here so you can see it from the horse's keyboard. Uh, but also 500 euros, about 600, 500 and something American dollars, maybe a little less. I'm not really sure about the euro to dollar conversion these days. They're also offering for a limited time Assassin's Creed Unity for free,
Hmm.
which in it's like, yes, you're offering the not so good game
Yeah, for free.
for
Take
free.
our
Well, I
take our
guess
one of our critically panned when it came out game for
games.
free.
Yeah, aren't we nice? I guess this is. I don't. I guess it's sort of a. Oh, we're donating money and to show you that we're in a good celebratory mood, we're gonna give out this game for free for a limited time. Like, oh, okay, sure. Probably a game that's not sold any copies physically in the last 3 or 4 years, maybe a couple of copies per month, maybe. So it's like, sure, I guess. Yeah, might get up in microtransactions or something. I don't know. Yeah, it's sure. So the idea is that you can you can explore Paris virtually and visit Notre Dame, which I did many years ago when I went to Europe. Beautiful place. But by the way, the damage is not as extensive as it looks. It looks worse than it is, according to some French sources. So they'll rebuild, hopefully, and he will be better and more glorious. But that's it. So that's all that we have for the news, I think, unless we have any other piece of news that I might have forgotten.
I mean, I saw the Kotaku article by a Cecilia de Anastasio. Uh,
Anastasius.
yeah, finally mentioning that. Finally, an outlet that mentioned the thing that I've noticed when it comes to the Epic Store game. That is that some sort of like there's something screwy going on with like people that don't own email accounts making Epic Store accounts using other people's email accounts. It
Yes.
seems to be apparently it seems to be some sort of cyber attack.
Hmm.
For what ends, I don't know. Like it seems kind of weird, but I thought it was weird that no one seemed to be talking about that.
Kind of like
And,
a version of service of denial, denial service attack. Because if you're doing a lot of filling a lot of new accounts very quickly, then people who want to make a new account might have a problem. I guess that's how it works. I think it might be a DCS attack, denial service attack.
yeah, and apparently at the same time there was news that apparently 600 Epic Games accounts were leaked on the internet in plain text.
Oops. Well, there goes so much for security.
Yeah.
And more fire for people who actually hate on Epic because it's not Steam and they love Steam and not Epic, and Epic is bad, and yeah, corporations are gonna screw you either way.
Yep.
So we finally get into the meat of today's program, if my internet holds, and I just jinxed it. We're gonna be talking about, and this is how I framed it, the inherent value of gameplay. Now, this is gonna be a tough discussion because I'm looking for basically a different angle to the whole should games have or shouldn't have like easy modes and stuff like that. So we're gonna be talking about disability and ableism. We're gonna be talking a little bit about storytelling. We're gonna be talking about game design certainly, again, and game experience from the outside. But one of the questions rising was like people was like, oh, and we need this, we need that, and it's like, okay. And I just saw again an extra credits video that kind of said all the things that I've been saying for a while, but they said it in a very limited kind of way. It's like, oh, some games benefit from this, but again, the implication in that video explicitly, well, not implication, almost explicitly said that without story, gameplay just doesn't appear to have any value.
Hmm.
So I want to sort of just get into it because when I was confronted with the idea of Sekiro, some people demanding that Sekiro should have an easy
And
mode, an
hmm.
easier mode, right? And people say no, 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 you're devaluing the game, etc. Or sure, we should have a easy mode because the game should be more accessible to more people, etc. No, it's the artistic vision of the designers. And I think in the shuffle of all the accusations and attacks and statements, there is one statement that has been made about it, which can be used for gatekeeping. It's like one of the reasons why the Souls games work the way they work is because of the nature of the gameplay, right?
Hmm.
And it goes into the idea of gameplay and video games still having that or retaining that idea of being competitive, being skill based, being having a level of challenge. It doesn't have to be always the same challenge. And I think it's something that we have stopped really talking about because we have embraced the idea again of storytelling in video games as the raison d'être of video games. Like video games are just as or should be as the seen as in way as movies and television, which means that the game and video game sort of falling by the wayside as far as what we expect or what we can see. So I mean, there's a lot of things that we talk about this. So I'm just gonna start with the idea of, is an easy mode on any one game a good thing or a bad thing?
Hmm. I don't think it's either. I think it just is. It's, I mean, I'm trying to think it like if there was like an easy mode and something difficult, there kind of is, and say Undertale. Although you have to save up a lot of money and buy essentially the special armor that kind of makes the game easier in terms
Mm-hmm.
of that it's harder to die, but you can still die. It just makes it easier. But then on top of that, you'd have to like just um, keep buying, try to save up enough money for the special armor, and then. But in terms of like, say, I'm playing a game right now, Pt.2. It's like an easy mode. Mm, I'm playing on regular right now, and it's like the challenge is okay, even though it kind of, to me, I'm finding the story a little trite. I've heard people describe this as like, oh my god, this is a fantastic single player experience from like, for especially for Titanfall 2 being a sequel to a like a multiplayer game. And I'm like, really? This game is like so trite, or like the story's so trite.
Mm-hmm.
There's some very good set pieces and certain levels that seem to have like, oh, this is kind of interesting. Where's it gonna go? But then I'm kind of disappointed. It's like, oh, it's okay, it just happens, and then we're just kind of getting dragged along. And uh, I, as somebody who never played the first one and I know very little about this game's lore and stuff, like I keep finding myself like I want to know more. I just kind of want to slow down, walk, and just kind of look around. Like the environments are pretty. But at the same time, they keep talking about like this conflict. And I'm like, okay, I don't really care because so far you've just said, they're the bad guys. They're trying to imprison us, throw we're fighting back, and they're the bad guys because we say so. It's like, well, okay. I mean, sure. And so far the bad guys that I mostly keep fighting are like mercenaries. I'm like, okay, so I'm fighting against people they've hired who seem to be really dumb and brutal, like unnecessarily brutal, even though they have like just regular soldiers from that faction.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, okay, well, making it, would playing it on an easier difficulty would probably make the game a little more enjoyable for me, because right now the thing that I'm finding that that I it might be a preference thing. It's that I'm not particularly enjoying running around killing stuff. I mean, as a giant robot, it's fine, but like when I'm just playing as a soldier, it's like it just, oh, it feels so generic and overdone. I'm shooting stuff. The parkouring isn't all the, it's okay, but it isn't all that fantastic because I keep finding myself like, you know what I could go for right now? I want to play Mirror's Edge. It's like your game shouldn't be like reminding you of a game that's done a mechanic in there much better. Like Mirror's Edge, like, I could go for another game right now.
Yeah.
But in terms of easies, like I guess it might make my experience a little better. I don't think it'll help in terms of like the story so far, like how kind of a little lackluster I'm finding the story. But in terms of accessibility, it's like, yeah, I guess it would make it slightly more enjoyable.
I mean, you played recently Inquisition on stream
Hmm.
on your YouTube channel, and
Oh yeah,
you
and I
played it in a
play.
hard mode. You put it in a harder
Yeah.
mode, yeah. Uh, why did you do that?
Um. Well, first off, I like it. I like collecting trophies, and there's one for that.
Mm-hmm.
So I took that as a challenge, and I did that. Even though there's one for Timefall, but for I'm like, I don't think I'm going to enjoy the challenge so much when it comes to running around and shooting. In terms of Inquisition, you can like I kind of enjoyed trying to break the games. Like, let me see if I can get like the best of everything, and let me try to find a way to kind of cheat the game and cheat its system, break its mechanics, and play it in a way that's not intended to. It was very difficult and it was kind of annoying. But I mostly just kind of like, I'm gonna beat you on a harder difficulty because I can. You can try and cheat the mechanics, which I struggled through it, but I enjoyed myself, even though it was kind of a slightly frustrating. I have played it. I have done like my first playthrough. or at least like my second for my third, I go down to casual and just run around and hit things. But the thing is, the opposite when you're kind of running around and doing things really easily, and you're trying to do everything like say all these fetch quests, you kind of notice how tedious they are because you have to run around, go kill the things, and just how repetitive it is.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when if you're on easy, you just kind of beat them up really with no issues. Like, well, what's the point of them just being there? Like, you might as well just not have the combat there.
I mean, I'm a person who only plays on normal. I rarely. I mean, there are some exceptions. Like again, I said that I always play in normal, finish the game, and then I go back and I cheat. Cause easier
Mm-hmm.
if the gameplay itself is
It's fun.
engaging, I want to do it again. Like over 1,000 hours I have in Skyrim. Right now I have a ton of god items and all that because I just I was like, oh, I want to build a house. I don't want to have to run around the entire, map trying to get the resources to get to town. So I just go into the console and get the resources and I build a house and that's it, right? But I already did it the hard way, right, or the
Mm-hmm.
average way, right? And I enjoy enough of Skyrim of going into the tombs and talking to people and doing the things that Skyrim provides, fighting the dragons and all that. That I keep doing it. So I think to me, Skyrim uh, has enough there for me to repeat playing the game, starting all over once again and doing
Yeah,
that.
and and
Um,
and let's also take our favorite example, Mass Effect. It's like I've never really unless I'm getting the trophies for it. Like I've never replayed it on like a harder difficulty.
yeah.
Except I think I once played it. I just upped the difficulty because I was thinking of doing a maybe a review of like Arya's DLC thing, the Omega DLC from the third game, and they're like, "Oh my god, these like weird Reaper creatures that they created. I can't recall what the hell they're called,
Mm-hmm.
their names, but they're in Omega and they're supposed to be incredibly difficult, and so much so that Arya's love interest ends up sacrificing herself, like protecting some civilians and us from them, and it's like it, are these things as tough as they're saying? It's like up the difficulty. I spam my powers. Like I am not having any trouble beating them. Even they're like, oh my god, these things are so challenging. It's like no, they're not.
Yeah.
Like
But going back to the whole Sekiro thing, and going back about the inherent value of gameplay. One of the things about playing the Souls games is that yes, they can be incredibly frustrating when you fight a boss over and over and over again. I have to admit, for example, that there were parts of the original Dark Souls game that I found some of them frustrating, others I found them to be downright scary, but not for the reasons. The story itself wasn't scary. Rather that I
yeah,
have. I said this many times before, and I said it during the stream. I'm going to say it again because it's true. I suffer from vertigo, particularly virtual vertigo. So in virtual spaces and in real spaces, I suffer from a degree of vertigo. There is spoilers for people who haven't played the game. There is a part essentially where there's just invisible surfaces.
mm,
So you suffer from vertigo. You don't know where you're walking. It was extremely tense. But I don't see how for example, oh, this should be an easy mode for this. Like I can see the things. It would make it easier for me, but I don't feel I should go to from somewhere it's like, hey, listen, you should redesign this part so people like me don't have to suffer from this, right?
yeah,
I would just chuck it to this is the design decision they made and whether it's a good decision or bad decision. I don't mind easy mode because sometimes, I think Jim Surley brought in their latest video the fact that for someone else, for many people, normal mode is fine. But people say, no, I need a bigger challenge. I go to harder modes. And it's the same reason somebody who in normal mode would not, can do it because it's beyond their skill sets. And easy mode could accumulate their challenge mode. So for them, easy mode is normal mode, and it's complete. It's a mode, right? You don't have to play it that way.
yeah,
Um, I also like the idea of toggles, right? Being able to, you know, characterize individual things in a game, right? So you can make your custom hard modes. When we're talking about ableism, and I think people, one of the things that this is a kind of problem to me, and sort of kind of irritates me, is that people tend to confuse easy mode with uh,
accessibility
accessibility.
settings.
You can have a lot of accessibility modes, right? such as varying control schemes, blind color mode, uh, toggling of speed and stuff like that. And that should be a. Ooh, hopefully, we're not dropping again.
Yeah, you dropped a little on my end on
Okay.
Zoom.
Yeah. Oh, it's been being jittery. Um, and yeah, you have this thing. That's perfectly great. But I think the problem is when you start digging into it, you get into the next part of easy mode, which is now story mode, right? Where, and I sort of rail against this in the sense of, oh, we're not calling it easy mode anymore. We're going to call it story mode, and the implication is that
Or
the
casual
gameplay,
mode.
the gameplay itself gets in the way of the story. Like the thing that makes the video
Yeah,
game a game gets in the way of the story, which is can be part of the game, but it's not necessarily necessary for any one game to have, right? It's like, oh, so the best way to enjoy this game is to sort of sleep through it.
not have the game. So I was gonna bring that up with Mass Effect. It's like in Mass Effect 3 they added a casual mode, which is like essentially the story mode. It's like enemies die really easily and it's not that big a deal. You still have to like walk through the corridors and stuff, which is it's tedious. Again, not as tedious as say as some other games where you turn it like say Inquisition. You try to replay the entire game with like easy mode and do every single little thing. Although even then, I don't think I heard people complain about there being a casual mode. They complained about the opposite when it came to Mass Effect, and that was the other settings, which is like, do you want the full Mass Effect story, or do you want the like super actiony version of it, which just cuts out the story completely, or like it makes auto decisions or something, which was the kind of like that's the thing that people complained about at that point. It's like, wait a minute, you're taking the story out of Mass Effect, but that's the point of it. It's the story, not
Well,
the
they
game.
weren't really taking the story. They were leaving you the story, just at their version of the story. They were taking the
Yeah,
mechanic that
of
allowed you
choice,
to choice to make some choices. Sorry.
of like having dialogue choice. It would just pretty much just play the scene by itself with whatever
Yeah.
choice.
Um, which in many ways is kind of some of these story modes are because you're just skipping combat or whatever the mechanic may be. Um, because here's an example I give. Let's say they talk about a puzzle game. I suck at puzzles, right? If you ever seen a stream of mine, I stop the stream. I go even the simplest, most brain dead puzzles that I just simply just kind of blunder through. I go search for a guide. Oh, this is a solution. Boom, boom, get it done, and keep on playing. In games that they're not focused on puzzles, but at some point, and this is the part where you get into the accusations of gatekeeping, with some truth to it, right? It's not completely false. Is that when people say, "Well, not every game is for everybody," but I want to play this game.
Mhm.
Are you are you engaged and have fun playing with puzzles? Because I don't. Oh, I do. Well, this is a puzzle game for you, right? Do you have fun having playing shooting aliens in the face? This is a game for you, right? Um, there are markets and talk about value because people talk about narrative and how you can do storytelling to mechanics, but there's some things about mechanics themselves that are just inherently good or have an engagement level that aside from the Skinner boxes and the like, which is another aspect of this as well. Playing Sekiro, I wasn't able to play Sekiro because my machine had some problems with memory and it kept crashing, so I had to cancel the let's play because I had to go back in the beginning. But it's a stealth game. And one thing about stealth games is the tension. The tension inherent in doing it right. And again, that sort of succeed, failure, learn curve, which is inherent to most games. You have to learn how to play
Mhm.
the game to a degree. Some are easy to pick up, easy to learn, hard to master. Some of them are just easy. Some of them are very hard to learn and hard even to master. Sekiro is a kind of game that is, at some level, hard to learn and harder to master. It's designed that way. So when you're stealthing, oh, did that guy see me? Oh, but is that thing in the corner? If I attack this person, right, and do I get it right? Do I have to run away, right? Some people don't like that, and that's perfectly fine. I understand why they don't like it, but that tension doesn't come from the fact that you're playing in 16th century Japan and fighting ninjas and
Mhm.
giant, literally giant black cocks, as in birds, not hen genitalia. It's the fact that that is something that is set up by the challenge of that particular gameplay, right? You could fail, you can try to just batch your way through the whole thing, but that
Yeah.
plays differently, right? It's moments where you're hanging from a ledge and there's literally a samurai on top of you looking for you, and then he just steps a little more and just falls to his death and literally dies twice because he has two health bars. So as the health bar gets depleted as he's dying, hitting the ground, it happens twice, and it's like, oh, that's just that's hilarious, right? At least it was to me when it happened to me, and so on and so forth, right? There is something about the gameplay. It puzzles, tickling
Yeah.
your mind, figuring it
Or
out. In fact, most gameplay, I think, if you really think about Souls games and all that, they're not simply about quick reactions. They are in essence mechanical gameplay puzzles.
yeah, like another one would be strategy games, or like real-time strategy games are they there's usually like a framing device as to why you're doing the thing or why you're fighting the thing, but essentially it's just an excuse to have the gameplay, which is like almost like chess. It's like trying to come up with strategies, trying to outwit your opponents, trying to micromanage your armies, your character, your even like down, some games will even down to like individual units.
Or just being able to just mass up this big army, just steamroll the enemy and start exploding, and just it may be easy because I've been playing games like that that kind of can be easy at times. The idea of just steamrolling your enemy and just blasting them to bits and obliterating them, that's satisfying in on itself. It isn't about the story whether you're fighting the orcs or the space aliens, whatever. Is the thing that you do has value unto itself. And I think we have, in our quest perhaps to prove that our games are more than just games, we kind of minimize it and even forgotten it, right? Um, and my problem with it is that it has lent itself to the kind of situation that we're today, where the grindy, life service type game, because gameplay doesn't matter. So it's just, you can have situations people just do the same thing over and over and over again without really working on having engaging and satisfying mechanical engagement in on itself, right? The game itself has sort of lost value in the process, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm.
And so companies rely on Skinner boxes and other mind tricks to sort of keeping you playing instead of making games that are pretty engaging, right? I mean, I'm playing Yakuza, and to be honest, beating up thugs in the street and getting stronger, it's just fun. Running around
Mm-hmm.
this little suburb of Tokyo, just like, oh, there's some guys over there who just are beating up somebody. Okay, I'm
Yeah.
just gonna go beat wail on them because I can, right?
Or just trying to kind of like, oh no, I accidentally ran into Majima again.
Yeah, which I've been running around like 3 or 4 hours. Yeah,
What kind of kooky like way he's gonna attack you this time.
yeah, and doing that is like the story is great, but there's a huge separation between the story and the gameplay. Gameplay is just you running around doing mini games and beating people up.
Just like finding like random NPCs who have like some random problem, and then you kind of get dragged into their
The world,
problem and end
yeah.
up solving it.
We're usually just hunting something or some object or some person and bringing them back to where they need to go, and that's it, right? You're a paladin. You're the criminal paladin basically in this game. That's what you are. Kiryu is it? But if you're running around and the idea of you running around and beating people up with bicycles and motorbikes and street signs and your bare fist is not engaging unto itself, you can say the story is great, but it's sort of like, and that's another thing, because we devalued gameplay in many ways. We can't really say, and we kind of become a situation where we don't call out games when they're bad
Mm-hmm.
or when they excel at gameplay, right? Especially when they're bad. It's like a lot of people's like, oh, this is frustrating and stuff like that. Well, maybe you're not only playing a game that is not for you, you might be playing a game that is just bad. It's a bad game. It has a poor implementation of something, or it's just bad or boring or repetitive, and it's just not a good game, right? But because of this focus on story, it's like, well, I love the story. Yeah, but you can get that in a YouTube video. Come on, Chabomon has like the 2,000 deaths of Garrus Vicarian. You want to see how many times Garrus Vicarians or Morning Solos dies? You can see that on YouTube, no problem. But when you say that to people, and now without justification, people get offended. You're telling me that you're gatekeeping. You're keeping me away. You're telling me I can't play this game. Which brings us to that old word that I don't want to use, but we all are thinking about it, so might as well say it: entitlement.
Hmm.
Ultimately, are we entitled to have every game out there be to our specifications?
Well, let me bring up an example. So I once had like my cousin buy me something off my wish list for Christmas a couple of years ago, which was the PS3 version of the Last of Us, because I had that on my wish list. It's like, hey, I've heard everyone's like talked about how great and fantastic and emotional this game is overall. It has great story, great characters, awesome gameplay. So I my cousin bought it for me for Christmas or my birthday. I'm pretty sure it was Christmas. And I tried it and it's like, no, I don't think this game is for me because it's a lot of like sneaking around and it works in terms of having tension and stuff and having to it sets up the right, I guess, like atmosphere when it comes to the gameplays.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're sneaking around and you're having to avoid like these fungus zombies, and sometimes you might have to run into like other humans that you have to fight because reasons. And it's like it has that going for it. But I kind of like at some point I kind of put down. It's like I don't think I really want to play this game. Like. And the only reason I picked up is because everyone was talking rave, like talking about how great it was, and like I just couldn't see what it was. I mean, maybe I could turn down difficulty all the way, or maybe I could just look up the story bits and all the cutscenes and stuff because they're fantastic for the PlayStation 3. This is like pushing the hardware to
Mm-hmm.
it to its limit since it came out at like the end of that generation. And I'm sure it looks even great, like better on the PlayStation 4. But at the same time, it's like, you know what? I don't think this game is meant for me. I don't really particularly like sneaking around, and I don't like horror. It's not necessarily horror. It's action adventure with like a little bit of horror elements and survival mechanics, and I don't think it's for me, and I don't feel entitled to have like this game like, oh, can I just not have that? It's like, well, I guess I just won't play it. I won't experience it, and I just won't be a fan of that stuff.
Yeah,
But
there's
like The Last of Us, like I see people getting excited for The Last of Us 2, discussions of whether we even needed a Last of Us 2. Like, I guess I just won't be part of that discussion. I don't feel entitled that I need to be part of that discussion as a fan of gaming.
You know what I want more maybe is easy mode. I would actually call God mode.
Cheats. Whatever
Cheats.
happened to cheats?
Yeah.
That's something I do with like a bunch of how I gathered all that footage of those aforementioned like death of videos. Is just I use console commands, I use cheat editing, I run around in God mode.
Yeah, I mean because God mode, and I cheated for example Mass Effect 2 for example getting all the weapons because sometimes here's the thing. In Mass Effect 2 I like the game but I dislike the fact that just like Mass Effect, the original Mass Effect, they gate certain weapons to your
Hmm.
characters. Like, why can I
Oh
not
yeah.
run around with all my weapons, right? Why can't I not have all the weapons? I played it as is, you know, and I learned it, and you learn the different things. And one of the reasons why you can't is because the idea is that different styles of character have different style weapons, and that affects how you play those characters. But sometimes you just want to have like a gigantic, you know, freeze gun that just freezes stuff, right? And just want to
Yeah.
kill everything on screen or something like a giant nuke
Or
launcher, right? And just do
and
it, right?
and of
Uh,
course that sort of kind of starts bringing us to the conversation of modding.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't, for example, there's a mod to essentially make enemies a bit slower on Sekiro. If did you do
Mhm.
that in your first single player, who am I? I'm not gonna be there like you're doing it wrong. You're doing it
Oh
wrong.
yeah,
Come on,
oh
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, you're
You're not a
cheating. You're cheating.
real fan of
It's like
Sekiro
no,
because you played it with a mod. Like,
they, yeah.
does that mean that if you play with any sort of mods in Skyrim, you're not a fan of Skyrim because you modded it beyond what the it's not the artistic vision that Bethesda put out. Oh, you enhanced the graphics to make it, you put HD textures and made the water like photorealistic. Well, you must not be a fan of Skyrim because you had to modify the game visually from what the artistic vision. Maybe Bethesda wanted it to look like a blocky piece of crap.
Well, the most common PC mod is essentially one that changes the UI, and changing the
Mm-hmm.
UI changes how you play the game, right? Because the UI for the UI was basically designed around consoles, and it didn't, transfer very well to PC. So somebody made a mod that made it a more, friendly UI, right? I mean, I've gone back playing games in the past that I played. I was playing, for example, Bard's Tale, and I almost got to the end, and I said, you know what? I'm not gonna finish this game because it's actually too hard. And hard because there's another aspect of it, which is what I call fake difficulty, something that feels hard for hard's sake. Because I think this here's how would I describe the two bands of my difficulty rating. On one hand, as far as easy is concerned, it should be the no don't sleep on it mode, where
Mm-hmm.
is this game is just hard enough that you will not sort of go zombie like walking around like
Yeah,
enemies can
you're
surprise you, can kill you, or can do something, or
it,
you could fail if you're not paying attention. The pay
yeah.
attention mode, right? That would be my normal mode, in fact.
Or it might challenge you in terms of like, whoa, ooh, I failed it with this approach. Let me try this one. What happens if I try this?
Which is the other side of the sort of harder modes, right? Kind of soul style. Like, you have to pay attention. You have to learn the patterns. There's something, not for everybody, of course, but I mean, I remember when I rang that first bell in Dark Souls, like, I can do this because I beat two bosses. It was like, I cut the tail of this guy, and this guy throws fire, and I jump back. Right, the feeling of achieving, it's, I think, what drives video games from the very beginning, that you can do the thing, right? Um, you can set up the different difficulties of how you do the thing, but you can do it the thing, right? But fake difficulty is when it feels like the game is just being difficult, and either you use a trick, you sort of, I don't know, you have to use a trick, or there's a very dumb way of doing things that you have
Yeah,
to sort of guess at, and just
yeah.
sort of.
You have to end up guessing. How did the developer want me to beat this game? Not like how can I, but how do they want me to?
And particularly when it's not about learning a new way of gaming, based on what you already know, but rather it's like, oh, we noticed that you mastered the basics of this game. We're not going to throw something completely different at you just to make it challenging, right? Challenge for challenge's sake
Mhm.
shouldn't be the. That's what I call fake difficulty, right? It's like, oh, we're just gonna make it
Yeah,
hard to make it
or
feel hard, right? And that's why I quit Barstales. Like, I have the two other games. Like, I'm not gonna play them because it's gonna be
and
more of that. Right? It's just gonna feel like.
and of course, I always hate the difficulty in terms of when it just handicaps you unnecessarily. It's like you're like a delicate little wilted flower versus like enemies that like, oh, you raise the difficulty, you get even more wilted, and then like the enemies are get more armor, hit harder. It's like, how is that fun? Like, and how is that fair? Like, it's one thing if you were playing as a literal wilted flower
Mm,
versus, I don't know, like a tree or something.
like a mighty
And
oak.
yeah, and it's like you actually, it's somehow doable.
Yeah, I mean, again, there's a lot of stuff about this, but I think we have to remember. Ultimately, I think that what irks me about all of this is that we sort of forgotten the game in video game, right? In the talk about storytelling, in this talk about difficulty modes, about accessibility, we've forgotten that. And what tends to happen, and this is not an easy mode thing, because just having an easy mode actually would be a fix to this, right? Because it's like you have your normal mode, And as long as normal mode is engaging to most people, and easy mode is engaging to other people, and harder mode is
Hmm.
engaging to other people, you're in the ball. You're being challenging, you're being engaging, etc. It's when you have stuff again like story mode where the tendency is, it doesn't matter what we ask the players to do, really. They're gonna do it anyway, as long as we don't put like to to find a point on it. We're just gonna grindy games, and you can just press the button until you're done, right? Games become chores when gameplay in on itself has no value. Then
Hmm.
gameplay becomes a chore.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's the point I think I was driving me crazy until this very moment. The moment gameplay doesn't have an inherent value into itself, it becomes a chore, and when that happens, I think most people are just going to be turned off, regardless of their skill level.
Yeah, that's gonna be like, well, why am I even doing this? Or it's
Yeah.
like, or especially, I especially don't like it when there's a gameplay element in that gets presented, and then regardless of the outcome of that gameplay, like section, the outcome's always the same. Like,
Mm-hmm.
say, going back to Mass Effect 3, it's like you fight against Kai Lang, and then no matter when you get his health down to like nothing, he just ends up activating his his cheat codes for cutscenes, and then just
Mm-hmm.
ends up beating you anyways.
So you wasted all that time doing
Yeah,
something that
and
could have
especially if
been
you're
just a
playing it on
cutscene. It's
hard, it's
like,
like, well, what the hell was the point?
it's like, it's I didn't, I beat you. I didn't.
Yeah, and
What?
it's not like because you ended up like fighting him and pushing him into like a certain position, and some convoluted tripe thing happens. Nope, he just like, oh yeah, well, I'll show you, and then just comes back at you harder.
And then you fight him again. It's like he's a pushover, basically, because you're
Hmm.
you're pretty leveled up. So yeah, I think that's my conclusion. When you ignore or strip away the inherent value of gameplay, playing a game becomes a chore, and that's when everybody loses, regardless of difficulty or challenge or ability to be challenged, or if they want to be challenged at all. So, without further ado, Chapman, where can we find you on the interwebs?
You can find me at under Chapelmon pretty much everywhere. I am Chapelmon underscore Aragon on Twitch and Twitter, and but I primarily hang out on YouTube as Chapelmon. Or my latest videos, you can just see more compilations of deaths of Mass Effect 2 characters.
And you can find me here, of course, Leslie Land 1. The 1 is important. I'm playing Yakuza. I'm thinking of jumping to something else because I'm loving Yakuza, but it's pretty long. So I'm going to try
Hmm.
to find something to alternate. Maybe I go back to Dark Souls just to prove a point, I guess. I'm looking for something that doesn't require me to have a, different, muscle memory situation. And also, we're on YouTube, usually as retransmitting or reposting the podcast and some other stuff that I'm doing. So thank you, everybody, for coming. And as always, we'll see you when we see you. Bye bye, everybody.
Bye.